What you're seeing is the reality in Russia right now. Dozens, maybe hundreds of trucks lined up on the important highway that connects Moscow to Rostov-on and Krasnodar. All these vehicles stopped, all waiting for fuel. Now I know what you must be thinking. Of course, it's the Western sanctions working. Years of economic pressure have finally taken effect. But that couldn't be further from the truth. These lines exist because Ukraine found its own way to impose sanctions. And this is being terribly effective. The proof of that happened on August 21st. That night, the Ukrainians carried out an attack on the Novochaktinsk refinery, the only one operating in the entire Rostov region. And what happened that night? Well, that changes everything. Let me tell you this story. In the early hours of August 21st, the city of Novochaktinsk woke up to the sound of 5 deafening explosions. The city is just 10 kilometers from the Ukrainian border. Residents reported seeing huge flames rising into the night sky, with columns of black smoke painting the horizon. The local oil refinery was on fire. Within minutes, videos of the fire flooded Russian social media. Residents filmed from their apartment windows, the orange glow of the flames lighting up the entire city. But here's where the really interesting part of the story begins. What? A few hours later, the Russian Ministry of Defense made an official statement. They claimed to have shot down 49 Ukrainian drones overnight, 21 of which were supposedly destroyed over the Rostov region. In other words, according to the official Russian version, all aerial threats were successfully neutralized. Now what? If you look at these images and the Russian statement, it's obvious that something is wrong here. After all, how does a refinery catch fire if all the drones were destroyed? How does a strategic facility like this turn into a hellscape if the air defense, in theory, worked perfectly? This contradiction exposes something much bigger than just an isolated attack. It reveals a gap between Russian propaganda and the reality on the ground. To understand why this matters so much, let me explain what this refinery represents. The Novochaktinsk facility is not just another factory. It processes up to 7.5 million tons of petroleum products per year. It specializes in the production of oil, fuel, diesel, and gasoline. But what really makes it strategic goes beyond production numbers. Location is everything. It is less than 200 kilometers from the front line in Donbass. It is literally the gas station for the Russian forces operating in southern Ukraine. Every tank, every military vehicle, every generator that powers Russian military communications in that region depends on the fuel that comes from this refinery. Here's the key detail. It's the only operating refinery in the entire Rostov region. Imagine for a moment an entire region the size of a European country, with only one source of refined fuel. And the Ukrainians? Well, they figured that out and turned that facility into what military strategists call a critical choke point. That means, in other words, that just one target, when destroyed, can paralyze an entire war front. But this isn't the first time Ukraine has done this. In fact, the Novochaktinsk refinery has become an obsession for Ukrainian military planners. And when you notice the pattern behind the attacks, it becomes clear that there's a very well thought out strategy behind all of this. The first of these attacks happened in March 2024 and forced a partial shutdown of operations. It was like a test. The Ukrainians were learning about the defenses, testing approach routes, seeing how the Russians would react. 4 months later, in July, they returned in force. The Ukrainian army claimed to have destroyed 1.5 million tons of oil and related products in that attack. $540 million worth of fuel went up in smoke in a single night. But the December attack was different. It was a show of force, a joint operation by the Ukrainian Navy and Security Service. They used at least 13 missiles and dozens of drones. It wasn't just an attack. It was as if they were telling the Russians, "We can hit you whenever we want, however we want." The resulting fire was so intense that it could be seen from space. Now you must be wondering, how do we know that all of this really happened? Damn it. After all, we're talking about claims made during wartime. And as we know, in wars, the first thing that dies is the truth. And here we reach an important point. Something that completely changed the information game in modern conflicts. It's called open source intelligence, which stands for open source intelligence. Have you heard of it? This is destroying governments' ability to control their narratives. Let me give you an example of how it's being used. Look, National Aeronautics and Space Administration satellite data through the Fire Information for Resource Management System detected extensive fires at the refinery in December 2024 and again in August 2025. This data is public, free, and can be verified by anyone with internet access. When? The Russian Ministry of Defense says it shot down all the drones. But the National Aeronautics and Space Administration satellite shows a massive heat signature exactly at the refinery's coordinates. We have a serious credibility problem. Independent analysts then cross-reference this satellite data with videos that Russian civilians post on Telegram and find the probable location of these images. All of this happens in a matter of a few hours, and this is where open source intelligence comes in. It basically takes public information and puts together a puzzle that reveals the truth. The government can lie as much as it wants, but satellites don't lie. And this information revolution is eroding the Kremlin's ability to keep up appearances. This campaign against Novochaktinsk is just one piece of a much bigger puzzle. Ukraine is carrying out a coordinated, geographically ambitious strategy against Russia's entire oil and gas sector. And when you see the full map of the attacks, the scale is impressive. They attacked the Ryazan refinery, one of the largest in the country, located more than 500 kilometers from the Ukrainian border. The attack caused a 50% reduction in production. For a company like Rosneft, this represents losses of hundreds of millions of dollars per month. A Rosneft facility in Saratov Oblast completely stopped receiving oil after an attack in August. Novochaktinsk refinery ceased all production on August 2nd. The Afipsk refinery, which has a specific military role because it supplies fuel for Russian warplanes, was also hit. But the most audacious attack was against the Druzhba pipeline. This is not just any pipeline. It's a vital artery that transports Russian oil to the heart of Europe, including countries like Hungary. The attack on the pumping station caused a complete, though temporary, interruption of the flow. This was more than a military attack. It was a geopolitical demonstration. Ukraine was showing that it can disrupt Russian energy exports whenever it wants, creating diplomatic tensions between Russia and its European clients. The numbers reveal the true impact of this campaign. At the beginning of 2024, Ukrainian sources claimed that 12% of Russia's total refining capacity had been shut down. An independent analysis by Reuters calculated an even higher number, 14%. To put this into perspective, we're talking about a substantial degradation of the industrial capacity of one of the three largest energy-producing nations in the world. It's as if Texas lost all its refineries overnight. The economic consequences are noticeable and are being felt by all Russians. To give you an idea, the government was forced to implement a temporary ban on gasoline exports to try to stabilize the domestic market. Even so, gasoline prices in Russia reached record levels in August 2025. Russian drivers are paying more for fuel than at any time in recent history. This means that the Ukrainian campaign has achieved something that years of Western sanctions could not, turning military actions into economic consequences, felt directly by the ordinary Russian citizen. And do you want to know how Ukrainians managed to break through Russian defenses repeatedly? With long-range drones. But when we talk about Ukraine, drones are not just simple, remotely piloted aircraft. They represent a new generation of autonomous weapons. They use artificial intelligence, basic but sophisticated enough to change the rules of the game. Machine vision is the key technology. This allows the drone to use an onboard computer with terrain data and satellite images to navigate to the target with meter-level accuracy, even under heavy electronic interference, which blocks global positioning system and all other forms of communication. In August 2025, Ukraine revealed its new trump card, the Flamingo cruise missile. This missile has a rather curious history. When its first versions were produced, due to a mistake, it came out with a pinkish color closely resembling a flamingo. That's why it was given this name. Despite this pleasant name, its specifications are simply impressive. HRC, a range of over 3,000 kilometers. This means that, launching from Ukrainian territory, this missile can reach anywhere in European Russia. Moscow, St. Petersburg, military bases, and rural areas all are accessible. The warhead carries between 1,150 kilograms of explosives. For comparison, that's more than 10 times the explosive payload of a typical attack drone. With this weapon, Ukraine gains total destructive capability. If drones cause fires and damage that can be repaired, the Flamingo can annihilate reinforced infrastructures permanently. Mass production is scheduled for later this year. When that happens, the strategic balance will change. Fundamentally, while Ukraine innovates in attack, Russia is fighting a losing battle in defense. To give you an idea, the Novochaktinsk refinery was protected by modern Russian air defense systems, including the Pantsir and the Tor. These are systems that cost millions of dollars, developed specifically to intercept aerial threats. The repeated successful attacks show that all this expensive technology is inadequate against swarms of small, low-flying drones guided by artificial intelligence. The situation became so desperate that in August 2025, President Vladimir Putin signed a surreal order. He ordered the training of military personnel and civilian volunteers to shoot down drones using smoothbore hunting shotguns. Think about that for a moment. The world's second-largest military power is ordering its soldiers to use 19th century hunting weapons to fight 20th century drones, and one equipped with artificial intelligence. The contrast couldn't be more dramatic. On one side, Ukraine is developing missiles that autonomously navigate for thousands of kilometers. On the other, Russia, handing out shotguns and hoping someone hits a drone flying at 200 kilometers per hour. It's a powerful symbol of how this war is exposing Russia's technological weaknesses. The war of narratives reveals even more contradictions. Local Russian authorities are desperately trying to minimize the damage and maintain an appearance of normalcy. In Sevastopol, in occupied Crimea, the local governor went so far as to attribute massive explosions to a pre-planned military exercise. This directly contradicted the report from the Ministry of Defense itself, which admitted to a drone attack on the peninsula. The reaction of the local population was immediate and sarcastic. Comments on Russian social media ridiculed the explanation, saying things like, "They're treating us like idiots." As you can see, with these real-time checks from public data, it became impossible for the Kremlin to maintain its image of military competence. That they are infallible? Every lie is exposed within hours. Every exaggeration about air defenses is confronted with videos of real fires. And now, with the mass production of the Flamingo missile scheduled for the coming months, Ukraine will have the ability to cause much more severe damage to a much wider range of targets. We're no longer just talking about refineries, command and control centers, naval bases, military airports, and weapons research facilities. Everything can become a legitimate target. This puts Russia in front of an impossible strategic dilemma. It will have to choose between withdrawing more air defense systems from the front line to protect its own territory, thus weakening its offensive operations in Ukraine, or accept that its strategic assets will continue to be systematically destroyed. Neither option is good. As you can see, this war has a huge cost, and that cost is being paid directly by those who started it. Now tell me, what do you think about Ukraine's strategy? Do you believe they can change the course of this conflict? Leave your opinion in the comments. If this content helped you better understand what's happening in the war, share it with your friends and subscribe to the channel for more analyses like this. See you next time.